This is Joe Kopsik, Marketing Director at the Cook County, Illinois Libertarian Party. I'm going to talk today about an interview that Tom Woods did. Tom Woods is an American historian, political commentator, author, and podcaster. He interviewed Joshua Smith, who was a candidate for Libertarian Party chair, one among four, the other three being Christopher Thrasher, Matt Keenel, and Nicholas Sarwark, who won re-election. That election was just a few weeks ago at the Libertarian National Convention. So Joshua Smith was interviewed by Tom Woods, and they were discussing libertarian socialism. This is from a YouTube video called The Present and Future of the LP, parentheses, and the Problem of, quote, Libertarian Socialism, end quote, in parentheses, published on August 18th, 2018. And Joshua Smith talked a little bit about his campaign, and then Tom Woods started to ask him about libertarian socialism and the Libertarian Socialist Caucus, which is a relatively new caucus, about a year or more old. It's one of about 40 caucuses in the Libertarian Party, about a third of which are left-leaning. So Libertarian Socialist Caucus is not unique. It's not the only left-wing caucus in the Libertarian Party, or left-leaning one. So I did another video the other day about Karen Ann Harlos kind of opposing libertarian socialism and the spread of those ideas, which she called propaganda, in her group, Libertarian Party USA Official. And Joshua Smith in this interview says that he admits to have been fighting a war against us libertarian socialists in the LP. So I'm glad to hear him admit that. Let's see what these guys are talking about. This is Tom Woods interviewing Joshua Smith.
All right, let's talk about the Libertarian Socialist Caucus. I want to know what it is that they believe, in your words, and what's going on with regard to this property rights resolution or whatever it was that was recently voted on.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Libertarian Socialist Caucus is a caucus, in my opinion, of leftist misfits that think that if they use language that people don't understand, they can twist our principles to support violence against business and property owners.
That was a mouthful. A lot of accusations. He said we believe in violence, and he says we're twisting language. Let me tell you something about twisting language for a bunch of people who ignore Pierre-Joseph Proudhon's distinction between private property and personal possessions. You're wanting to talk about ignoring, wanting to redefine words. Private, a lot of people want to pretend that means for profit. And, ANCAPs and right libertarians are giving in to the left wing and democratic smears against libertarians by saying that everything that we want private, when we say privatize everything, they want to pretend that we want everything for profit with corporate subsidies and force everyone to buy it or something. But no, of course, we want free markets, no subsidies, no taxes, no regulations if possible, at least no involuntary regulations. So Joshua Smith wants to accuse libertarian socialists of corrupting the meaning of words. I just like to ask him, what, if anything, is there a difference between private property and personal possessions? Of course there is. Personal possessions are they're usually cheap, mass-produced, easily movable, things that are not necessary to survive, things that do not make sense being cooperatively owned, and things that a person almost would never think to rent out or loan out to someone, except if you go to Rent-A-Center or something like that. But private property is a different thing. It means property in the means of production. I mean things like plants, factories, farms, factory farms, large swaths of land, public commons. If you're renting a space of public commons, you have to compensate the community. How about this? We'll say that rent is not theft if you get private owners to pay their rent to the community for the space they occupy, which the community foots the bill for in one way or another, by lower property taxes as a result of what's going on in the property, or they have to foot the bill for paying the police to protect it, or paying for a licensing system to license security guards to protect it. A lot of these businesses that you want to pretend are private, they're not so private. Government's doing something to them, and you need to admit and recognize that when that's happening. And you need to understand why we care about certain people, certain scholars and academics, philosophers of anarchism and libertarianism. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon called himself an anarchist, and we think the anarchism is the logical conclusion to libertarianism. The state doesn't do anything right. So why can't we voluntarily agree to anarchist systems so that we don't force everything on everyone through politics?
Many of them are running, as candidates around the country. They're going on media outlets like RT saying that the party supports Medicare for all, and this occupancy and use mentality. Some of them are mutualists, some of them are socialists, some of them are actual anarcho-communists, and they're really kind of trying to muddy the waters purposely, which is a leftist tactic.
So yeah, you see how he just throws all this at yes, an anarchist can be anything: a mutualist, a communist, an individualist. I'm starting to wonder whether it can be a capitalist. I think the pricing mechanism is important. I think supply and demand is important, and I think that you can value those things without the state. I think that the state interferes with supply and demand meeting with each other and clearing markets so that people can afford things that are mass produced. You need an army to defend the high prices of things that are mass produced, that, if people can't afford them and they're mass produced, like, that doesn't make sense. Mass production capitalism is supposed to be for a mass consumption, audience, yet this is the thing. Tom Woods founded the League of the South, which, among the least of its problems, supports the sales tax. And I don't think libertarians or free marketers should support a sales tax. One, it politicizes trade. It makes it so that people can buy things without giving money to the government. So that appears to other people to be a political decision. Every purchase they make. Sales taxes, it just it raises prices and it deters consumption. There's no reason to deter consumption. Consumption's not bad. Conspicuous consumption can be bad. Waste can be bad. Destruction can be bad. But consumption and production are not in themselves bad, only waste. And so another thing, when Joshua Smith says Medicare for all, the Libertarian Socialist Caucus support Medicare for all, I've explained this before. The most economically efficient way to buy health insurance, much less, anything, is to pool people's purchasing power and buying power together collectively, to use the idea of the economy of scale, pull it together in a cooperative to get what's called an oligopsony. It's a small cadre of purchasers, or you could have, there's market ways, there's market mechanisms to get private health insurance too, that is non-state. You can have a mix of non-profit and private and cooperative and public options. What we want is a larger set of alternatives. And yes, public welfare, so to speak, should be common, as it says in the Constitution. But when it says common, it must apply to all people. That's why Medicare, it's difficult. It is an economically efficient and viable solution, in my opinion, but I don't want to make a mandate out of it, because when you have a mandate, you can order people to buy at any price. So we have a healthy disagreement and discussion within the Libertarian Socialist Caucus about whether and how and to what extent different mixes of markets or socialism, or a thing called market socialism, which you can look up, or mutualism, which Joshua Smith just mentioned. There's plenty of ways to get health insurance to people cheaply, with cooperative models and with private models.
We all know that listen to the show. They're trying to muddy the waters so that they can fit in here and kind of take over a movement that already has ballot access. We already have ballot access in most states. So
Joshua Smith doesn't get it. We're not joining the Libertarian Party. I've been in the party for 10 years. Shipley, at least, I don't want to estimate how many. These guys have been in the party for a long time, just as long as you. So don't just say that we're just joining all of a sudden, free riding on your ballot access that you're working hard towards. We're running our own candidates. We have at least 8 of them, and we are helping you get ballot access. Our Libertarian Socialist Caucus people are out there collecting signatures to get libertarians, right or left, on the ballot.
So it's easy for them to get on a ticket, put that L next to their name, and espouse these beliefs that are antithetical to what we're doing.
I explained thoroughly on my blog 5 years ago why I felt that ANCAPs and right libertarians and pragmatic political libertarians are muddying these same waters that he's talking about. I'm talking about people like Joshua Smith and Tom Woods, people who kind of worship private property and don't think free trade has anything to do with free markets, and assume that all exchange is voluntary just because it takes place, assume that all exchange is mutually beneficial just because it takes place. They're market worshipers. It's market fetishism.
So, I've been kind of at war with them for over a year, trying to get them to realize that, this isn't what the party stands for. You guys have the DSA or the Greens or whatever,
I find it interesting that he says that we're violent because of our stance on property and rent being theft and our problems with landlords and large landowners, people who own large amounts of land not paying what they owe to the community. I'm not saying the state, saying the community, which can express itself through markets or many ways. It doesn't even have to be incorporated. But I think it's ironic that Joshua Smith is accusing us of violence, yet he's admitting to being in a war against us. We don't consider ourselves in a war against Joshua Smith, yet he's the one who's considering us violent. He's using violent rhetoric to describe his antipathy towards us. It really explains the Red Scare that's going on between him and Karen Ann Harlos and the Social Caucus.
And so, now that I'm on the LNC, we saw an opportunity to stand up to tyranny, as I would like to call it. I see these ideologies as tyranny, this communist socialist ideology that's killed over 100 million people around.
That is a lot. Joshua Smith is neglecting the fact that the United States has been at war about 3/4 of its history. We've been in a permanent state of emergency for decades upon decades. We haven't had a constitutional legal war since World War II and Pearl Harbor. None of the wars that have been happening lately are constitutionally authorized by the Congress, which is supposed to represent the people. Nixon tried to refuse Congress handing over all its war-making power to the president. He tried to refuse them, but they overrode him. And he's remembered as a bad guy, even though he tried to do that. And Congress giving all their power away, the people's power away to the executive branch is another thing. That it also happened under Bush. So we're seeing over and over again the U.S. military policy. We're intervening over and over again in these countries we know nothing about, have nothing to do with. They're 1,000 miles away. We're taking these soldiers away from their families and away from their homes where they could be productive and start businesses, hopefully cooperatives, and have jobs. There's no point in this, and we are infiltrating and sabotaging and dropping bombs over and sabotaging the elections of countries that are just trying to have democratic elections. And because it's Democrat, people assume, oh, it's collectivism and therefore socialism and therefore communism and therefore Stalinism and therefore Hitlerism, and we got to bomb them because they're the next Hitler. It's like, holy shit, slow the fuck down.
On the world.
So, no, it is really ironic to say that communism and socialism are the cause of 100 million people's deaths when, Stalin did collaborate with Hitler. Look up the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty. The Kaiser did fund Lenin. The CIA and Yale helped Mao get into power. It's not like the Western powers in the United States have no responsibility in letting these horrible regimes come to rise.
I don't support it in a party that is centered around non-aggression and individualism. And so we came together, a few of us on the LNC, we came together to put together a resolution that basically left no wiggle room for people who want involuntary economic models to operate under our banner.
When he says involuntary models, he means models that he can't personally be convinced of, models that are involuntary to him. He doesn't care about what other people think are voluntary economic systems. He doesn't care about what other economic systems people want to volunteer to be a part of and not make anyone else participate in or fund. So leave them alone.
And we put it out 2 days ago, thinking it would most likely be a unanimous yes vote. The language was solid. It really didn't leave any space, like I said, whatsoever for this violent rhetoric that they're pushing. But it also left space for people with antithetical economic views to participate as long as they weren't touting this involuntary violent structure. And so,
see what he's doing? He's trying to cast, socialist information, socialist ideology, and, rhetoric. The idea that rent is sometimes theft, that was the resolution, I think. He's trying to cast that as hate speech, essentially, when he and Tom Woods and people like the League of the South, which Tom Woods founded, and their associates in the alt-right. League of the South was banned from, they wanted to have armed protests in Charlottesville. They're open white nationalists. To say that socialism is hate speech, but that what these guys and their friends saying is not hate speech, that's what I think Joshua Smith is implying there, and that concerns me.
It didn't get voted yes on, and I think at the end of the day, only 6 or 7 of us voted yes on it, and
out of how many?
Out of 17.
Okay.
And so that was a real big kick in the gut for me personally. I know it's a big kick in the gut for a lot of people in the party and out of the party that have been watching to see what we're doing and what kind of strides we're taking to become more principled. And so, it hurts outreach. It hurts a lot of us, but at the same
when he says it hurts outreach, he means it hurts outreach to the right and the alt-right, and it hurts potential funding from the alt-right.
Time, I see all these good people coming to the party,
and from giant corporations that receive tons of taxpayer-funded privileges and protections.
You and Dave Smith and Jason Stapleton and all these great people come to the party with these loud voices, and we have all these great small L libertarians all over the country that are seeing that there's people working inside the party to move it in a better direction.
So we want small L libertarians in the party when there are Republicans and independents who are small L libertarians, but he doesn't want European 19th century anarchist libertarians, small L libertarians, to be in the Libertarian Party. Oh, that makes sense.
And so, it looks bad. It looks bad on paper. I'm not going to sit here and blast people for it, but it is showing that we need people to come to the party.
Then why are you kicking us out? You will have a lot less people. Do you do math?
If I was able to come to my campaign less than a year ago to run for chair of the party and then get on the LNC without people knowing who I was, the importance of all the small L libertarians coming to the party to help us with this political process is huge, because you can do so much by just showing up. You know what I mean? All you have to do is show up. Show up to your state affiliate, your local affiliate, vote on a couple of issues, go to a couple of meetups, have some beers with some other libertarians. And then when it comes time to become a delegate, you come to the 2020 National Convention in Austin, Texas, and you can vote on things like new leadership for the party. Maybe I run again, maybe I don't, maybe someone better than me runs. You get to vote on who our next presidential and vice presidential nominees will be.
The Libertarian Socialist Caucus is saying the same thing. Hey, new people, whoever you are, if you like what the party's saying, whatever part of it, whatever side of it, whatever faction of it you like, if you like any part of it, what anyone in there is saying, come join us, come vote at the meetings, run if you don't like the candidates, or if you do, whether you do or not, run. We need more people running. There's crazy people out there running for office. Someone's got to run against them in their own primaries. Don't just run as a libertarian, run as other parties to challenge those people in their primaries. We need to get everyone politically motivated, interested, and able to understand how to write legislation, of course, to run for office.
If you like Weld, you can vote for Weld, or you can vote for somebody else.
Yeah. And we have every right to do that, and we have as much right to do that as Joshua Smith and the Mises Caucus and the right libertarians.
So it really shows the importance of coming and trying to, kind of clean out this festival and make it something that we can all be proud of.
See what he's saying? Clean out? No, I know you're going to say, Joshua, if you watch this, probably going to say I'm overreacting like a crazy, hysterical SJW, but cleaning, no. This borders on dehumanizing rhetoric, ethnic cleansing. Does that ring any bells to you? People being deloused on their ways into countries because people wanted to view them as parasites and viruses and scum and filth and garbage and trash. You need to know the history of dehumanizing rhetoric, and self-ownership is part of that, because your body is not property. You're a free living thing, not a piece of property.
Out of.
All right, let me play devil's advocate here. The number of people in the Libertarian Party sympathetic to or actually belonging to the Libertarian Socialist Caucus is vanishingly small. And therefore, all the emphasis placed on this is just wasted. It's wasted effort. Forget about it. These people are going nowhere.
I've never even heard the phrase vanishingly small. I don't know if anyone's ever said that before. It doesn't make sense. We're not shrinking, so we're definitely not vanishing. We may be small, but we appear to be growing.
Everybody knows they're going nowhere. There's so many other things we ought to be spending our time on. But these people, given that they're completely marginalized, are not the people to be worried about. What about that?
This is how I know you're playing devil's advocate, because I know that you know better how this socialist leftist movement spreads. So knowing that, yes, it was small, especially a year ago. There was only the 6 of them that people keep talking about. Everyone keeps saying.
You notice he used the word spread there, like a disease.
And there's only 6 of them. That's bullshit. There's way more than 6 of them.
There's 650 of us. Oh, it's a contagion. You better get out the vaccine.
There's a lot of them. There was one running around our convention with a red and black anarcho-communist flag wrapped around his neck, trying to call for this bottom unity movement.
Yeah, bottom unity. The left libertarians and the right libertarians getting together to fight fascists, whether they pose as socialists or capitalists, to fight all tyrants, all imperialists, all authoritarians. Yeah, that bottom unity sounds terrible, right?
It's much bigger than what people think. Just because they weren't able to get enough money together to show up to the national convention doesn't mean they won't be able to in 2020. They're organizing, they're recruiting, they're running as candidates, they're telling the public these are the things that we support, and we need to be loud about it to let people know that that is not what we stand for.
Yeah, make sure people know that you support laws that you think are not laws because they support, private owners and established jobs.
And is not what we support as a party, and those are not our political goals. And so, if people want to kind of hush.
See, that's the thing, Joshua. The problem is that you have political goals. Did you sign the party pledge to not support the use of violence to achieve political goals? I think you're missing something, buddy.
Push this and say, it's not that big of a deal. Well, that's how most leftist movements become what they are today. So it's time to squash it. It's time to let people know that that's not what we support.
Incidentally, it's not just that you're dealing with people who are, like instead of being anarcho-capitalist, would be anarcho-communist or something like that. And we're just dealing with people who have different first principles. That is most of what it is. But we're also dealing with people who are just really weird people. I mean, I'll just name a name. I don't know anything about Mike Shipley, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's mentally ill. And I'm basing that on just the kind of things people have shown me that he says. So,
and what he's about to say, I'll get to in a minute, but he says a political thing. Tom Woods says a political thing that Tom Woods disagrees with. So Tom Woods wants to make believe that, Tom Woods isn't crazy. He's just making believe that whoever disagrees with him politically must be mentally ill. And see, if you look up a newsletter that Newt Gingrich's PAC put out in the early 90s, they try to use words like weird and disturbing and disgusting and crazy, and mentally ill kind of fits in there. And that is kind of more, it's not exactly dehumanizing rhetoric, but it's language designed to dismiss people's opinion, and that's not fair. We have to listen to people even if we think they're crazy, unless they're a imminent threat to us.
For example, Trotsky was more libertarian than Nazis like Tom Woods or Eric July.
I don't know who Eric July is. I will say that Trotsky is more libertarian than Lenin and Stalin, Stalin, I will remind you, Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty to carve up Poland between Germany and Russia. Stalin, negotiated with Hitler. Stalin was a bad guy. So obviously Trotsky, more libertarian. Not saying he's a libertarian of the right, of course. Not saying he's a libertarian overall. But I agree with Shipley. Trotsky's more libertarian than a Nazi. It's very easy to be more libertarian than a Nazi. And that is why Tom Woods is slightly more libertarian than a Nazi. But yeah, like I said, the League of the South, which Tom Woods founded, wanted to have armed protests in Charlottesville this year. It has been designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. It pays lip service to some free market principles, but it also supports some really troubling neo-nationalist things. See, the thing about Ron Paul and libertarianism and the Confederacy is that we want to support secession, and like Rothbard or Mies, whoever it was, says, we want to support secession down to the individual. We think that law or order, society is best run by people who are operating near to it. but that's not necessarily to endorse, white nationalism, especially in a country with a lot of different nationalities, a lot of different nationalist movements. But, I think, if these guys really don't like the state, then they're not supposed to support any state involvement. And they seem to just want white people and pro-lifers to conquer the government in order to, basically ban Marxists. But this is what's called a fusionism. It's conservatism that plays into libertarian ideas, and it only looks libertarian when the rightist is out of office. And confederations can be good. There are anarchists who support confederations. I think Bakunin and Proudhon were some of them, but that doesn't mean that the Confederacy's aims were, most of their reasons, their stated reasons for rebelling, was slavery. A few had other reasons, but that's not to say that they were the major reasons, and anyone who tries to deny that is a historical.
Eric July's a Nazi. I'm a Nazi, apparently. And then there's another quotation where people are saying, look, Mike, obviously these people are not Nazis and not even within 3 universes of Nazis. So you sound kind of mentally deranged when you say things like that. So could you maybe, put a sock in it just for your own sake so you don't sound like a raving lunatic? And his response was, well, look, there aren't any actual Nazis around today. So now the word Nazi means people like Tom Woods. So get over it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I would take issue with my friend Mike Shipley there. There are actual Nazis around today. You can look up Arthur Jones, who's running for U.S. House as a Republican in Illinois, just about a half hour from where I live. Yes, they're actual Nazis. I mean, there's David Duke, who is a white nationalist. Not exactly sure if he really supports, I don't know if he's calling for violence, but the thing you have to realize is even if people aren't calling for violence, if they're engaging in political activity which endorses people who do, then, like the mass detention and deportation and deprivation and separation of people at the border, that's political violence and it's terrorism. It's not okay just because it's legal. And that's what these alt-righters and right libertarians and ANCAPs are missing. Sometimes the law is right. That doesn't always mean that the state is always right. It means that the thing that's being criminalized should rightfully be criminalized. This doesn't mean the state has to criminalize it. Yes, dispute resolution organizations make sense, but we have to have this conversation in depth. And dispute resolution organizations can operate on a non-for-profit basis, and you don't need to have capitalism to have freedom.
But you know what? You can't actually do that. It turns out.
It doesn't work
you
that way.
can't actually say right. Yeah, that's not how language is.
Yeah. Well, that's another tactic of the left, and you know that, Tom. They don't adhere to definitions of words. They don't believe that definitions mean anything, and that's the big part of their movement. Is just.
This from someone who believes that private property means nothing, and thinks that a toothbrush is private property, and thinks that Pierre-Joseph Proudhon and Karl Marx would have equated a toothbrush and a factory.
They try to twist these things up to be what they say they are, and
as Goebbels said, you have to accuse your enemy of what you yourself are guilty.
Logical thinkers and as Austrian economics guys especially, we adhere to these definitions because that's what they mean. That
when you say adhere to these definitions, you mean you're stuck on them as if no other words exist besides those words. You ever hear how often these people use the word private and market and capital and free and liberty and it's just meaning ownership, self-ownership. It doesn't mean anything to them. They're buzzwords, and you can't have. If you have free market capitalism, then that reflects a state preference or societal preference for capitalism. There should not be a set economic system in the Libertarian Party, for the Libertarian Party. That's why the platform changed. Unfortunately, it's changed back. It changed from it changed from capitalism to free markets. And free markets means that people are free to choose whoever wants to provide them with security and defense, dispute resolution, and justice in a market, which includes individualist, mutualist, communist, cooperativist, as long as they're behaving voluntarily and not conscripting anyone to buy their services.
That's what these words mean. National socialism means national socialism, and
then John McCain is a Republican just because he says so. Then Bill Weld's a Libertarian just because he says so. Then a monkey bird is a bird. All right. I don't remember how that one goes. But no, you can't just, this is the definition of like just reading the headline of the article. National socialism should have been called social nationalism because it was a hyper ultra-nationalism, German racism that was trying to deliberately appeal to socialists to confuse and trick workers into supporting the Nazis. You could say they were against capitalism. They had a few anti-capitalist measures in their platform, but they were mostly against Jewish capitalism. And the quote-unquote German socialism, the Völkisch kind of community thing that they were trying to do, that they were trying to label as socialism, by stealing the word socialism and stealing the word red, or the color red on the flags, and Hitler infiltrating an already existing socialist party. They also killed the socialists, the people who were more socialist within their party. Gregor Strasser, who was not anti-Semitic, and his brother Otto, who was. And then you had Goebbels as the propagandist saying that, him and Hitler saying that anti-Semitism and socialism are the same thing. You have to understand German and Austrian history to get into this. The Nazis were not socialists. They were trying to appeal to people who wanted socialism, but they were trying to appeal to workers and workers' nationalist sentiments. And the Nazis started this whole idea against cultural Marxism, the idea that Jewish people were trying to bring in socialism and communism into the country to undermine the solidarity of the nation and the workers and introduce miscegenation, race mixing, and so-called muddy up the races, make them impure, and all this racist bullshit. The Nazis were not socialists, because when you say socialist, you're talking about socialism as it is actually practiced, which for the last 150 years, the dominant form of socialism has been Marxism. Nazis were virulently anti-Marxism. And when you say National Socialism is socialism, especially without explaining why or giving any examples of why, I could give you examples of why not all day. You can look at my blog. That is ahistorical. Joshua Smith is being ahistorical, and he's just reading a headline. National Socialism is not socialist. It is much more ultra-nationalist, racist, ethno-statist, nativist than any socialist regime has ever been.
And it was a movement in Germany, and these people were not good people. But it's not who we are, And it always makes me laugh when, because Mike Shipley does try to equate me to being a Nazi all the time, and I'm half Israeli, which is hilarious.
Don't get me started on why Israelis and Jewish people can be Nazis. Two of the founders of Israel, Ze'ev Jabotinsky and Theodore Herzl, Theodore Herzl did not like the Jewish religion. He didn't have his son circumcised. Ze'ev Jabotinsky preached against the Eastern European, the look and the culture of the Eastern Ashkenazi Jews, and he was kind of piling onto the Western European idea that the Jews were a foreign Asiatic Eastern race that was coming to make them impure, and Jabotinsky wanted to basically get Jewish people to look more like, the people who are oppressing them, shave their beards off and lose their cultural identity, lose their way of life, and lose their tie to their religion. And you look up Chaim Rumkowski, a rabbi who the Nazis got to slowly give Jewish people up to the Nazis. He was saving a few, but he was giving them up. Listen to Professor Noam Chomsky and Professor Norman Finkelstein, who have compared what Israel's been doing in Gaza and Palestine, or Gaza and the West Bank. They've compared it to, Chomsky called Gaza an open-air concentration camp, and Finkelstein said that it's because of his parents and what they went through in the Holocaust that he's criticizing Israel for their virtual Holocaust of the Palestinians. So don't pretend that no Israeli can be a fascist or a soft fascist. I've heard about what kind of transportation security and what kind of segregation in the schools and on the buses they have in Israel. I'm not an idiot, Joshua Smith.
But and then to say Eric July is a Nazi because Eric July believes in private property borders or whatever, some god awful stupid thing that makes
who
him a
knows,
Nazi.
whatever the heck. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with. These are the kind of intellectually dishonest people that we're dealing with, and it's exactly the reason why we put out this motion was to say, hey, this is not okay. This is not okay in our party, and it's not something that we support. And so, he's one of many in that caucus that cause these kind of problems on a daily basis for libertarians that, they want to talk about this resolution being a waste of time. What is a waste of time is constantly combating people in our party that want to twist up every single thing that someone says. That's what's keeping us from working on candidates. That's what's keeping us from winning elections, So
You're too nice to these people because it's not. I bet you didn't expect me to say that. It's not so much that they're intellectually dishonest. Intellectually dishonest would be somebody who, let's say, uses a fake quotation from Benjamin Franklin, and he knows it's fake, but it really helps advance his cause. Like
Oh yeah, you mean like the libertarians, the right libertarians who want to pretend that Nazis are socialists by using a fabricated, wrong Hitler quote, which was actually said by Gregor Strasser. Here's a quote. We are socialists. We are enemies of today's capitalistic economic system for the exploitation of the economically weak, with its unfair salaries, with its unseemly evaluation of a human being according to wealth and property instead of responsibility and performance, and we are determined to destroy this system under all conditions. This quote has been repeatedly misattributed to Adolf Hitler, so that right libertarians can say, oh, look, Hitler overtly wanted socialism, and therefore he was trying to have socialism, but it collapsed and failed, and that's why it turned into Nazi or some bullshit like that. Hitler didn't even say this. Gregor Strasser, he was a Strasserist. You could call it social nationalism. It's really not a good label. If you look up national syndicalism, social patriotism, you can kind of get an idea of what this was about. But Gregor Strasser was not anti-Semitic. His brother Otto was. They were both murdered by the Nazis. Along with in the Night of the Long Knives. I forget which one of them was murdered in the Night of the Long Knives, but they're both murdered eventually. But in the Night of the Long Knives, a bunch of socialists in the Nazi Party, the more socialists of them, the one who were questioning Hitler's, dedication to the workers, which he had none of it, just the racist German workers who supported him, of course. No, he had all those socialists killed. The Nazis did not like socialists. The right wing of the leadership killed all the socialists. There weren't any Nazi socialists because they all got killed.
Greenbacker movement, the people who want the Fed abolished so that the Treasury can directly print the money, as if that's the point. Those people are the worst on this I've ever seen. In fact, Bill Still, who I think tried to get the Libertarian nomination some time ago, who's a big promoter of this, I have to hand it to him. He's got a whole page on his website of fake quotations that he's trying to get his fellow greenbackers to stop using because you're embarrassing us because these are obviously phony. Because they sent, I know I'm getting a little bit sidetracked.
No, it's okay.
Greenbackers. They make me crazy.
History lessons. I'm okay with it.
But my slogan about this is that if a quotation from the Founding Fathers sounds like it could have been written yesterday, it probably was. That's my saying. Because I listened to some of these things that Thomas Jefferson supposedly said. I thought, gee, that's funny. That sounds like a Greenbacker newsletter from 25 years ago. It doesn't really sound like an early 19th century writer. But anyway, point is, that's intellectually dishonest. If you use a quotation, you know it's false, but you just use it anyway. But
here's another intellectually dishonest quotation that right libertarians and ANCAPs throw around a lot. When Murray Rothbard said that we must allow police to instantaneously administer justice on the street, they like to pretend that he was saying like now, like before property disputes are resolved, before stolen property is returned to its rightful owners. No, he meant afterwards. Once we live in a free society where the things that people own and claim to own are actually theirs because they earned it, then it will be more acceptable to physically lay a hand on people who try to steal your stuff. Now it's kind of not, because we don't really know whose stuff is whose, because the government has a hand in things and people inherited stuff and we're being taxed all the time. It's a mess. It's hard to keep track of. Murray Rothbard believed that homesteading is how you justly acquire property.
To call normal people who believe in the exact opposite of National Socialism Nazis, that's not intellectual dishonesty. That really is a kind of a derangement. I mean, there's something upstairs. There's a light that's flickering, or
these guys hang out with Richard Spencer. If you want to argue that he's not a National Socialist, go ahead. I mean, I'm not going to try to say that Medicare for all has anything to do with Nazism. It has a little to do with socialism. It has more to do with neoliberalism, honestly. But Richard Spencer hangs out with these guys. He used to hang out with Ron Paul. He openly supports an ethno-state, both a white ethno-state in America and a Jewish ethno-state in Israel. And he says he supports Medicare for all. And otherwise, it's a mishmash of libertarian and conservative and neo-Nazi-esque positions for that guy.
There's a screw that's loose, or there's a plug that's only halfway in, or I don't know. I mean, I don't get how anybody can. I mean, I've had a lot of opponents in my life, right? I've had
Yeah. So my point was, I think it's really ironic how Tom Woods is saying, like, we're the most anti-national socialist people in the world. It's like, no, you're pretty close, because the Nazis used the rhetoric of privatization, yet they just had the state enforce existing property rights and kind of take over existing property rights. It sounds like these guys with their misplaced Rothbard quotes are just going to let the police run rampant and roughshod, no matter whether the claim was justly homesteaded and acquired in the first place. They don't make these distinctions. What's Joshua saying to Tom about he just gave him a history lesson? I'm giving the only history lessons here. I listen to Tom Woods. I don't listen to Tom Woods. If I did, when I do, I listened to Locke once. He did a thing on John Locke that was cool. But I listened to Tom Woods for a history lesson. These guys don't seem to be discussing much history on this episode.
neocons who haven't liked me. I've had left liberals who haven't liked me, leftists who haven't liked me. I've had traditional Catholics who don't like me. I've had conservative Catholics, liberal Catholics who don't like me. I've had in all the different worlds I've moved in, I've had opponents all over the place. But not anyone in a million years would have used that word to describe me. And of course, listeners right now are all laughing because they're thinking, I listen to this guy every single day. And by the way, dear listener, he is implying that you too must be one of those N words. He's implying that you too.
Did he just equate Nazi with the N-word against black people? This guy's fucking ridiculous.
Are one of those, because why else would you be listening to me? That's how deranged these folks are. But again, there is a little part of me that is concerned that I know you let the nose under the tent, and then before you know it, right? I get that, but geez, I do worry that maybe we're giving them more publicity than they would have gotten otherwise. And I'm not sure that it hurts outreach, because I'll tell you, 99.9% of Americans don't know anything about the Libertarian Party, much less the infighting that's going on. And even less than that do they know about Libertarian socialists.
Right. Well, it hurts. It hurts. Like personally, it hurts my outreach because my outreach consists mainly of reaching out to small libertarians that do follow the party, that do watch the party, that
follow the party. Small L libertarians. You're talking about people outside the party. Me, Matt Keenel, and Shipley, and everyone else. We're in the party. You're talking about hanging out with people outside the party, like Tom Woods, who you're talking to right now. You're more outside the party than we are.
Call us all kinds of names because they see the infighting, they see the garbage, they see these leftists, and they watch national leadership attack people like Tom Woods and so on and so forth. So it does hurt outreach, to a degree.
I don't care about national leadership attacking Tom Woods. I don't care what Tom Woods thinks. People like national leadership of Libertarian Party, like the at-large, Joshua Smith and Karen Ann Harlos, they're attacking members of the party. Who cares about Tom Woods? He's not in the party. I don't want members to be attacked.
And it's hurt my outreach personally. When we passed this resolution, or when we introduced this resolution, I currently have an email inbox that is full of emails from libertarians around the country in support of this resolution, saying, I've been waiting for the Libertarian Party to do something like this for years, and thank you for the good fight and putting up, doing the things you said you were going to do,
Yeah, thank you, libertarians, for not recognizing that property titles and long-standing contracts are basically just effectively laws that the government's enforcing with our money that it has to steal. I don't know why you have a blind spot for that. But yeah, thanks for affirming that things I didn't work for are mine and that the government's going to protect everything. But we're going to have a minimal government, so it's going to be okay. It's not going to get out of control.
One of my platform planks was to reaffirm our principles within my first 30 days, and especially the ones on private property. And so, I do think it hurts our outreach, and I see it personally. I see these people that were getting excited about this resolution, and that now everyone's all bummed, and so that's what happens. It starts out as a small group, and
yeah, I'm sorry, a government doesn't get to give you goodies. If you think that your title to a property entitles you to that property, then you're entitled. You don't deserve goodies. You don't deserve a trophy. Shut up, Snowflake.
We, for the last year, people said, "Oh, just ignore them; they'll go away." They're not going away, Tom. You know what I mean? I tried to ignore them for several months. They didn't do anything.
Yeah, or a plague. You're gonna have to scrub us down with Zyklon B.
They found new reasons to call me a Nazi and attack our platforms and our principles and stuff that we support and still operate under our banner. And so, I feel like maybe the resolution didn't have to be such a big deal around the movement, but it became a big deal. And
well, maybe that was kind of your fault.
At the end of the day, it would have been an important one for us to pass, but it failed, unfortunately.
I have to say, by the way, I was pleasantly surprised that the official Twitter account of the National Party twice tweeted out messages of welcome to me or retweeted something of mine pertaining to the party. I wasn't expecting that, so that was certainly something rather nice. I got a nice telephone call from somebody at National asking me to do something I haven't yet gotten around to doing. But anyway, I mean, it's been friendly, and I'm not looking to start fights. I really am not. I just want to spread libertarianism. That's my entire agenda. There's nothing hidden about it. So what else are you going to be occupied with? You've got these people. Oh, actually, wait, let's say something about your debate. Aren't you debating Mike Shipley?
I am debating Mike Shipley, yeah, on August 31st, I think at 9 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock Eastern time, I believe. Yeah, we're going to be debating. I guess they tentatively named it how big should the tent be, but it's more so going to be about property rights and why it's not okay to steal people's stuff.
Unless you have a magical title from the government saying that it's okay. As long as you don't name it a law. You can't name it a law because then you're a socialist. But if I have a title... that's the point that I'm going to be arguing anyways. And so, yeah, we've been at each other's throats for a year, and someone finally sat down and said, "You guys want to debate?" I said, "Absolutely." So it looks like we'll have a debate going on.
Are you going to be able to send me a link to where people can watch this debate?
Yeah, I'll send you the event invite. It's put on by a gentleman named Brent DeRuyter, or the Anarcho Redneck, if you're familiar with him. He's a really cool guy, and he'll be moderating as well. He's a great guy, so it should be fun. And I plan to go in there and destroy, of course. But I'm still learning to debate. I still get a little emotional during debates, so I'm going to try and put that in check and talk logically and explain why it's important for free people to be able to own their own property.
Sounds like a cowardly thing to do for people who openly want tyranny and violence. We don't want to steal anyone's property. Here's the thing. Like I said, Murray Rothbard was okay with the seizure of illegitimate or unjust, rather, land titles. Like I said, he believed homesteading is the only legitimate way, or the only just way. I keep making that mistake. And this is what we all do. We all have to work on ourselves. Justly acquired property and legitimately acquired property are not the same thing. And that is the blind spot that ANCAPs and right libertarians have. And I know they say you shouldn't criticize people for something that you just learned. Well, we all need to learn this. I'm one of the first among the Libertarian Party to learn it, and I'm trying to explain this. And maybe the non-aggression principle is not enough, because a lot of these people just basically are acting like it's okay to just, as long as you don't technically lay a hand on someone, you can exploit and coerce them into hierarchies and deprive them and make them dependent on you and just drive them insane as long as you don't actually hit them. It's like the equivalent of when you're fighting with a sibling, and it's like, you punch the air right in front of their face, an inch from their face, you don't touch them. It's like, I'm not technically hitting you. You can't tell on me. This is the equivalent of ANCAP and right libertarian philosophy. See, the thing is, property rights interferes with itself. You don't need socialists to interfere with it. Property rights interferes with itself. People compete for property. It's a first come, first served system that doesn't make sense if you believe in markets. When we say rent is theft, we are saying that rent is theft in the same way that taxation is theft. Libertarians believe taxation is theft because it's exploitative and it's coercive, and they're taking advantage of the fact that people are trying to have homes and have property in the area that's unfortunately governed by some tyrant, some crazy governor or whatever. We don't want rent or taxation, but we should also have a conversation about when and under what conditions rent and taxation can be voluntary, or can be efficient, or can be acceptable, or can be pragmatic under some. So we have to have all these conversations, and we have to have more alternatives to everything we do, whether it's housing, health insurance, anything the government does that could be provided by private actors. I'm talking about nonprofits and cooperatives and mutuals providing those things. You have to give people the choice of what kind. You see, the choice of what economic system you will live under is not just a question of whether it'll be voluntary or whether it'll be forced collectivism. You get a choice of what kind of economic system you'll participate in every single day when you go buy things from lots of different firms. Some of them are more profit and hierarchy oriented than others. You may go to consumer oriented firms, cooperative firms, sustainable business alliances. There are a lot of different types of firms that exist, and they're all alternatives to the state, or they can be when they are not interfered with by the state too much, not inhibited. And we all need to be able to form these firms and go into competition or cooperation or both against the established monopolies, whose rights to continue to collect profit is really, it rests on their patents and their privileges and their LLC status and their property. And white people are using their property to discriminate against and exclude and essentially torture people and extort them. And that is not legitimate, because that is a form of fraud. And that's exactly how that's how we're taxed. We are taxed coercively. It is not consensual. And a lot of people, they settle for cheap, potentially dangerous, usually flammable, living spaces, which exist. The empty residences exist like to the tune of 6 of them for every homeless person in America. If you know anything about economics, there's no logical reason to need either markets or government to distribute or allocate these things. They don't need to be distributed or allocated. Their prices are being kept artificially high due to land and housing speculation. It's a subsidy to the land market. Libertarians who care about voluntary exchange and free markets and not having too much government interference in the markets should care about this, and they should want to get rid of every single form of subsidy and privilege and protection that businesses get with taxpayer money. I don't want to be taxed of anything unless I get it in my pocket first and I get to make that decision on my own. Yeah, privatize everything in the sense of get it disentangled from the state. Let any firm do anything we would want the state to do, or if we wouldn't want the state to do something, don't have anyone do it. We don't have to find a way to replace the state all the time. But see, these right libertarians, they want to pretend we don't need to replace the state ever, and that community governments, decentralized networks of participatory democracies, or panarchy, they want to pretend those things are just not possible. Polycentric law, there's all kinds of alternatives, and there's voluntary methods of enforcement, which they believe in. They don't want to have these discussions because they're afraid that they will lose, and they are economically ignorant and ahistorical, and they don't have time for history lessons because they're trying to make money, and they're trying to get more people in the party who have money so that the party can keep going as a taxpayer-funded institution that's built on theft from the public under the guise of the law, because we're playing the game. We're abiding by the rules of the game that lets us steal public money as long as we get 1 out of 20 people voting for us. So we're just trying to introduce some morality and some vocab, frankly, into the discussion. We're sorry that you feel it's so upsetting that you have to admit that we don't want to steal your toothbrush, and that we don't want to kill landlords. It's just like, how you don't care about homeless people, and if they starve on the street, it's not really your problem. That's how we feel about landlords. We're only guilty of negligent manslaughter of landlords, in the same way that you are all guilty of negligent manslaughter of homeless people and people who can't even get enough, money or opportunity to acquire job skills. Thanks.